Okay. And so we're going to look at P5. We're going to draw a few shapes. We're going to make a little drawing. And then we're going to make an image from that drawing and post it on our blog. And so we'll go over, basically the main steps of any project that we're going to do throughout the semester. Before we get into it, I'm going to talk a little bit about this first project. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to recreate an artwork by an artist. And I have a few links here to some artists that may be interesting to try to do that have aesthetics that will lend themselves well to what we're going to be doing in our code today. But if you have other artists that you're interested in working with, by all means, do that. You don't have to make it exactly the same. It's basically something that can be some sort of inspiration, and you can try to make something close. But this is our first assignment. You can you'll see that you can kind of like choose your level of ambition with this project depending on how much time you want to spend on it and how confident you're feeling. You can choose something simple, you can choose something complex, however you feel comfortable. So we'll just quickly look at a few of these artists. This is Vasily Kandinsky. There's a lot of ads on here. It's an abstract artist that uses a lot of geometric shapes. So this will be something that will be easy to do with code. Some of them are obviously very complex. You could do a simplified version of one of these shapes or designs. So that's one option. Julio Leparc is an artist that I really like a lot. This is a link to an exhibition that was at the Met a few years ago. And these are paintings. They're not, programmatic or digital, but they have this very programmatic feeling to them. Like he'll do sort of like a bunch of variations of a couple lines. So there's a lot of very geometric, basic colors. So there's some really nice options here. I might choose one of these to try to go for. Kazimir Malevich is a early 20th century Russian artist who I really enjoy. He does very simplified abstract paintings. This website seems to not have any images anymore. Let's just Google him. So this is if you really are feeling like you don't want to spend a lot of time on this project, you can do Black Square. Or he has some other ones that are a little bit more complicated, may take you a little bit more time. But he is a very interesting artist. Agnes Martin is another favorite of mine. She does these kind of large scale, sort of light and kind of like, very sort of minimalist works, but you can see she's done these kind of like grids. This one has some kind of nice shapes and some light colors. That's another inspiration. Carmen Herrera is another artist who uses geometric shapes. These would be a little bit harder to do, but I think you could figure them out. Some kind of basic shapes and colors. And so looking at these, you'll probably start to get a sense of what we're going to be working on with the code, at least as we get started. When we're starting to learn how to do some basic things, we're really just going to be working with some basic shapes and colors and learning how the computer draws those things. And as we learn more code, we'll be able to learn more interesting things that we can do with these. So I'm going to choose a Julio Leparc image to try. Let's see. I've done a lot of these before. This one might be kind of tricky. I might fail at this, but I'm going to try it and just see how it goes. And if I fail, I fail. I'll do my best. So I'm going to open this image if I can. It looks like I can't make it any bigger. Can I drag on it? There we go. And, maybe I'll just make like the middle one or something like that. We'll see. I'll figure it out. Again, if I can't do it, that's not the end of the world. Okay. So I'm going to choose this image, and that's kind of going to be my goal. I'm going to go to the P5 editor. And so this is our web editor for P5. As I mentioned earlier, we can write code and then see the result of that code very immediately. So that's going to be fun for us to do. And it's a very simple interface. So I'm going to go over some of the basics of the interface. It won't take too long, but there's a couple of things that we can do here. So if you haven't created an account yet, you will want to sign in and create an account. And once you create an account, you can save your projects. And another thing that's really nice is you can also duplicate other people's projects and save them on your own account. So you can take something that I created and then make a copy of it and then add your own code to it. So we probably don't need to do that today, but I'll go over how to do that in the future. A couple of interface things. If we click on this menu over here, there's a couple different highlighting schemes. I like to use the high contrast just because I'm presenting, but the default is this light theme, and there's a dark theme as well. And then you can set the text size. I might make my text size a little bit larger so it's easy to see, whatever works for you. Autosave is on by default, so it's going to save as you're working. It's going to format your text. There's a few other things here. There's a few basic accessibility things you can toggle here, which may be useful. And that's pretty much it. And then there's a few interface things. There's this auto refresh button. I recommend turning that off because if you have an error in your code and it refreshes it, you may get like some bad Stack Overflow or something. You don't want that. You can name your project here. So if I click on this, I can type in the name of the project. So I'm going to name this assignment 1, recreate an artwork. And then I can save it. I can go to File and click Save. And once I've saved it, now I can duplicate it if I want to. So if I want to stop somewhere and make a copy and add to it, I can use duplicate. I can share, so I can send this in various formats to other people. And we'll use that in a little bit when we post. I can download the code. I can add it to a collection. So I'll probably create a collection for this semester. I'll create MMP 210 Spring 2024. Oh, I guess I have to make that first. Oh well, I'll do that later. Oh, maybe I have to do this. Yeah, I have to go to collections, create collection, MMP 210 Spring 2024, create collection. Now I can maybe add the sketch. There we go. Okay. So you can add collections. Those are basically like folders, so it's a good way to kind of organize your programs. You probably won't really need to use them, if you just have a few sketches. Under Edit, this button is really useful. You can tidy your code. So as we start to write some code, you're going to see there's some conventions for how it's supposed to look, and that makes it easier to read. And it's hard to get used to that at first because you're probably not used to doing it. Maybe with some HTML and CSS you've done it before, but most of the time when you write, you just write paragraphs and you don't really think about it. The tidy code will really help because it's going to format your code for you. And if your code is kind of messed up, you'll see where maybe you don't have the right stuff. So that's really useful. Under Sketch, we won't really use this too much. And then the help section has keyboard shortcuts. So there's some like key commands that you can use, kind of like Photoshop or Illustrator, to make things go a little faster. And there's a reference page. This is the main P5 website. And this is really, really useful. If you're like, how do I draw a circle? Go here, type in circle, and you will see not just a explanation, but some code that you can copy and paste into your program. So we'll use that a lot. And then there's also this About page with some links to other things for P5. There's also actually under here, there's this examples section. This will show you a bunch of different basic sketches using P5. And so if you open these, you can be like, oh, how do I do like, let's just use one of the, so this is a bunch of 3D stuff. We could do, I don't think we're gonna do 3D, but we could. But you could be like, oh, what is this snake thing? This seems cool. And I'll play this. And there's a snake game. I don't know if it actually works. Let's see. IJKL. Okay, let's try it again. I have to click on the canvas. That's the problem. There we go. Okay, so you're like, oh, that's snake. And look, there's all this code that makes it work. So you could read through that code. You could make a copy of it and do some of your own stuff with it. So those examples might be fun to play with as well. Let's go back. I'm just hitting the back button to get back to where I was. Okay. So we're going to write some code. I'm going to skip a couple things. We're going to go into more detail with some stuff later. But basically with P5, every time you create a new sketch, you're going to see something that looks like this. These are the two main functions. Setup is going to set up your project. And it really, for now, it's only going to do this one basic thing where it says create canvas 400 by 400. Your canvas, P5, is for art and design using code. And so the way that it describes the program is as a sketch. So we're kind of like sketching an idea through code. And the thing that it uses to do that is a canvas like you would paint on. But it's not a real canvas, it's this, digital square. So when we say create canvas, it makes this square for us and then we can draw on it. And those numbers, you might, sort of guess, change the size of the canvas. So if I choose to edit this number to like 600, that's going to make the canvas wider. And if I edit this number to 200, that's going to make the canvas, shorter. And so I can make the canvas however large I want. Of course, if my canvas is big, I can sort of adjust this window to see, the whole thing. So that is useful. And then, so that's what setup does. It will do some other stuff with it later in the semester, but for now, we're just going to leave it alone. The other function is draw, and draw is what's drawing on the canvas. So you can see this thing here that says background. That's what's actually drawing that background color. And the 220 is the color that we're using. So you might remember, you probably learned about RGB in MMP 100. So RGB is our red, green, and blue. But when we have one number, that means it's the same number for each one. And so that's why it's gray. It's grayscale. So if I change that number to 0, we're just going to have black. So there's 0 red, 0 green, 0 blue. If I change that number to 255, we're going to have white. And then if we put 3 numbers there like our regular RGB, if I do like 0 red and 255 green and 100 blue, I'm going to get this kind of like green color. So I can mix my colors together. One of the things that you might want to use is like a color picker. If I just Google color picker, I'll get one right here, and I can, figure out what are my RGB values. I can just paste those into my background, and I'll get that color. Let's leave this here if we want to use that. But the thing that's kind of nice about P5 is it knows about CSS. And so we can also use CSS colors. Remember, CSS has like names for colors. And if I want to do that, remember we talked about strings earlier. We can put quotation marks around it. And so I can put some quotation marks and I can say blue. And it'll give me a color. And so any HTML color I can use in P5. If I want to remember what are all the HTML colors, I can go to HTML color codes. I'll put a link to this in the video. And here's all my colors. If I go to names and jump to purple, we can grab lavender. And I'm going to copy and paste that. We get lavender. So we can add any color there. We're going to look at more sophisticated ways to do color, but this is a good way to get started. We just use a name of the color we want. It looks bad on the screen. Yeah. The screen color is not great. Yeah, or the projector color. Yeah. The other thing that's kind of nice, actually it's not showing up right now. Maybe if I do lowercase. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so it should be lowercase. I don't know why they have it uppercase on the website, but when I go to lowercase, this little dot comes up, and that's also pretty fun because I can click on there, and I have a color picker. So this only shows up with the HTML colors for some reason, but now I can really just like choose whatever color I want. I can drag this around. And actually for my reference, what I'm actually trying to do is kind of like a yellowy, beigey color. So let's try to get that. So go into yellow. We'll kind of do some kind of desaturated, beigey yellow. I think that's good. Let's see what that looks like. Whoops. Okay. That's a good example of getting an error. Sometimes you get an error, and the P5 has their own console, so it'll show you errors, and it usually gives you like some advice about what to do. And basically, I hit the key too fast, and I deleted my quotation mark, and there we go. So I've got my background. So that's how I can do colors. There's a couple other things that we can use to do color that I'll go over in a second, but let's add some shapes. So I'm gonna look at my reference image again. So there's a couple of things going on in this drawing, which is good. I'm trying to decide which to do first. You know what I'm gonna do, because this drawing is a little complicated, I'm just gonna start with the middle image, and then I'm gonna work out from there. If I don't get there, that's fine. So this has like a box around it. And so there's a couple ways I can make that. I have a lot of basic shapes in P5. If I want to look at what shapes I have, I can go to the reference and I can go to shape. And 2D primitives are just like basic shapes. So there's an arc, that's an arc, you know, like a circle that's cut off somewhere. Ellipse is a circle that's or either long or tall. A circle is just a circle. Line is a line. Point is a point. Quad is like a rectangle, but the points are in different places. Rectangle or rect is rectangle. Square is square. And then triangle, the hardest shape. We will go over it. So let's start with, where'd my reference image go? Let's start with these lines. We have this border. We could do a rectangle or lines for this. Let's do a rectangle first, and then maybe we'll have to add lines later. But let's just do a basic shape first. So if I want to draw a shape in P5, I'm going to make a new line here. So when I'm writing code, I tend to have one line per, or one statement or expression per line. And this expression just sets the color for the background. Whoops. And so if I want to do something new, I usually go to the next line. Notice that P5 already has my cursor over here. So that's just a style convention. Once I'm inside of this draw function here, it moves me over a little bit so that we know we're inside the draw function. It doesn't actually change the way that the code works, but it just makes it easier to see what's going on. You'll notice if I don't follow that, if I start my rectangle right here, it's not gonna break anything. But if I go to edit and tidy, it's going to move it over. So it's going to say this is what it should look like. So let's start with our rectangle. I'm going to click here, and I can read this long description, and I can copy this in there. If I want, I can just copy that and paste it right into my code. And I can also see what all these things are. So this is what a lot of our code is going to look like when we get started. We're going to have like a name for something, which is called a function. Eventually, we'll write our own functions, but not for many weeks. Most of the time, we're going to use these functions that P5 makes for us to do specific things. So rect is going to make a rectangle, and it has these 4 numbers. And you could probably start to guess what those things might do, but let's throw them in there and we'll play around with them and see what happens. So I'm going to put in a rectangle. I'm just going to put a number. I need 4 numbers. So actually, these are squares. I'll start with a square. Just start off easy. Let's do a square. Okay, so let's do a square. So I only need 3 numbers for a square because the size is the same for the width and the height. So let's put 20 for the first number, 20 for the second number, and 20 for the last number. And so we've got a square. That's exciting. We're getting somewhere. So let's see what those numbers do. Because one way of figuring out how this works is just like playing with the numbers and seeing what happens. Another way is to read what do these numbers do, because the order of the numbers is important. But we can also just play with them, see what happens. So we're working with our square. Let's look at, so we have x, y, and s. X is the x coordinate, y is the y coordinate, and s is the size. And there's a couple optional things. But we will just start with the basics. So if I change this first number, right now it's 20. Let's change it to 100 and see what happens. So it moved over, right? Pretty basic. So that's what we call the x position. It moves the square over. So let's see what happens if I set this to 0. So now it's all the way at the left side of the page. Okay, so that's cool. So that tells us a couple things. One is that 0 is all the way at the left. The other thing it tells us is that 0 for the square is also on the left side of the square because it's not overlapping. If we do like -10 or -10, see how now it's like cut off a little bit? But if I do 0, the square is exactly on that side of the page, right? So we know that's where the page starts or the canvas starts. We also know that the square starts from there. So what happens if we do our second number 0? Now our square is in the top left corner. So again, this tells us a couple of things. One is that 0, 0, the beginning of our canvas, is the top left. This is a little bit different than what you might have done in math. If you did geometry, you use the Cartesian coordinate system. And that looks like this, where 0, 0 is in the middle, and x goes right, positive, and negative to the left. Y goes up, positive, and negative to down. In our P5 canvas, our 0, 0 is at the top left. So x moves to the right, and y goes down. So it's a little counterintuitive. So if I make y larger, the square goes farther down the page. And if I make x larger, square goes farther across the page. So this last number, we can probably guess. If I make this bigger, square gets bigger. Pretty straightforward. So let's line this up the way we think it should look. Okay, it's kind of like basically in the middle. So I'll move it up maybe to 2020 again. That was pretty good. And then here's actually somewhere where I can use some math. So I know that the height of my canvas is 200 pixels, right? Because I can see that right there. And so if I set the square to 200, that's going to fill up. But since we're starting at 20, it's going a little bit farther than we want it to. So we could use some basic math. We could say, well, we know the canvas is 200, and we know we started at 20, so let's minus 20. But now we're right at the bottom, so we want a little bit of space at the bottom. So let's minus 20 again. And so we can just do math right there. It'll do it for us. So we don't actually have to figure out what that value is. We can if we want. I can open up the console and say, what's 200 minus 20 minus 20? It's 160. Okay. So I'll turn that into 160. But either way, really, it doesn't matter how you, express the value. Okay. So we've got our square. We're getting somewhere. Let's talk about a couple things that we can do with the way that this is designed. So you'll notice a couple defaults for the square. One is that there's a black outline, which actually matches what we want. So we want to keep that. But the other thing is there's a white inside. And so each of our shapes has two different components. The inside is called the fill. It's what color the shape is filled with. And the outside is called the stroke. It's like the stroke of the pen. You've probably, maybe if you've used Adobe Illustrator before, it uses the same terminology, so it's very similar. So if I want to change this, I could set the fill, and I could set the fill to match the background. So I can just copy this color and set the fill like that. So now it looks like we can see through it, but it's really actually just the same color. So there's another way I could do that. I could say no fill. That just means there's no fill. We just see through to the background. What I did here, sorry, I moved a little fast there. If you write some code and you want to keep it but you don't want it to work, there's something called commenting, which means that when I put 2 slashes in front of the code, it's going to ignore it.
Professor, can you make the text larger?
Yes, I can. Is that good?
Larger is better.
Larger? Is that?
Yes.
That's good? Okay. So yeah, I can also do that by hitting Command and question mark or slash. And so I can kind of like test what it looks like. Also, I'm hitting Command Enter to run the code. That's why I'm able to refresh the code really quickly. So what I'm doing is I'm holding Command on the keyboard and hitting question mark to comment. And so when it's out, I have that default white. And then I'm hitting Command Enter to run the code. And then if I do that again, I hit Command question mark or slash to bring that back. And I run it again. Now we have that background fill. Okay, so my code looks a little weird. Let's go ahead and format. And so then we can also change the outline. So if I look at my reference image, it's, I could probably do black, but it's a little bit more gray. So maybe I want to change this color. So I can set the stroke and I can say gray. So that looks a little bit closer to what we have in the reference. So we're starting to get closer to the reference image. I might say at this point, this is really small. Maybe I want to make it bigger. I can change some of these numbers around, but I'm just kind of slowly building up the image that I want to create. And I'll probably, I could move it over at some point, but for now, I'm just kind of getting the basic shapes. So let's keep going. We'll make a couple more parts of this. Any questions so far? Okay, cool. So I'm about to run into something that's a little bit more complicated, which I have these 3 different circles with different colors. And I think I have an idea about how to do that. But I'm not 100% sure. See if we can come up with something. But let's just start drawing it and see what we can get. So let's just start with we'll make a circle and we'll make it a color and then we can go from there. So here's what I'll do. I'll make a circle. So I'll say circle. And you're going to notice something that's very different about the circle than the square. So I'm going to put the exact same coordinates or the exact same numbers for my circle. So I'm going to copy those numbers, put them right there. And notice where my circle is, it's not where the square is. The circle draws from the middle. So when I say 2020, the square draws from the top left. And this is something we can change. These are just the defaults, but that's going to work. This is where the square starts, and it goes like this. The circle also starts here, but it's from the middle of the circle, so it grows from that. So you'll notice that, and you can play around with the numbers. So we've got to move our circle over. So I'm just going to try some different numbers here. So it starts at 20. I could try 60. It's not quite far enough. Try 80. Getting closer. Let's try 100. Now it's lined up. That looks great. Okay. Let's move it down. And I'm just going to kind of guess, since my square is 2020, I'm just going to guess that my circle might be the same numbers. So let's try 100, 100. So we got it into the middle. If we missed, that's okay. We can just change that number. Just hitting Command Enter. And then our circle's a little too big compared to our reference, so we're going to shrink it down. So this number is going to be a lot smaller. We'll try 50. It's that's a little too small. 80 looks decent. Let's check that reference again. I think that's pretty good. It's good enough. So we've got our circle. Let's change the color. So I'm going to say for the color, I'm going to set the fill. That's the middle color. And this fill is, let's do this one. It's red. Let's just say red. It's pretty obvious. And it's a little bit of a darker red, so maybe I would click on this and move it down here somewhere. Hit Enter. That's a little too dark. Let's try that again. Somewhere like there, maybe. Oops. Okay, I'm doing something weird with the mouse, so I'm just going to hit Command Z to undo that. I did something weird. That's why I want to use the real mouse and not the... Oh, you know what? It's moving. Okay. I think I just need to click outside of... Okay, that looks good. And then again, I don't want a stroke. I don't want an outline. So what I'll do is say no stroke here. And that just is going to get rid of that outline for me. One thing to really quickly mention, because we've seen it a couple times at this point, is this text convention. And you'll see this more. So notice that with our functions, the things that P5 creates, if it's one word, it's all lowercase. That's typical for programming. We use lowercase letters mostly. But notice the ones that are 2 words, the second word is capitals. That's just for readability. It doesn't change the way the function works, but it just makes it easier to see. This is create canvas. If it was all lowercase, it would just look like some nonsense. So same thing with draw, background, fill, stroke. These are all one word, so we just use one word, all lowercase. This guy, no stroke, is 2 words, and so the second word is capitalized. That's called camel case. It's used in different programming languages. It's called camel case because it has a hump like a camel. Because the second word or third word, fourth word, any word after the first word is going to have a capital letter. That's just for readability. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the triangle in the middle. And how I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna say, triangle's the hardest shape. So I'll tell you that right now. And that's because instead of the two shapes that we've created so far have an origin, a point where they start, and they have a size. And it's very easy to move the origin and the size stays the same. It's very easy to change the size and the position stays the same. Our rectangle is the same way. It has a point of origin here, and it has a size. And so if I move the origin, the size stays the same. If I make the size bigger, it stays in the same place. Triangle is just 3 points that are put together. So if I change one of those points, it changes the size and the position at the same time. So it's much harder conceptually. And so usually what I like to do when I'm making a triangle is I might actually make some circles to get the right position and then turn it into a triangle. You don't have to use a triangle, so you could skip this, but it's like the hardest one. So here are my triangle circles. This is just a comment. If I'm trying to remember why I'm doing something, I'll put 2 slashes so it gets ignored by the code, and then I'll just write a note to myself. So I'm making some triangle circles. So I'm gonna make a circle, and I'm just gonna kind of guess that it's like 100x and 50y. I'm gonna make it a little smaller. I'm gonna make it 10 pixels. And I'm just gonna hit that, and there it is. It's close, not quite. And I'm gonna change the color to green so it stands out. And now I'm just gonna find those points. So I have to go farther down on Y. Okay, there we go. That's pretty good, actually. I don't know how I got it that quickly, but that looks pretty good to me. I'm not gonna spend any more time. Let's make our next circle. So we've gotta go farther on X and farther down on Y. So I'm gonna go to like 120x and 100y and do another 10. Okay, so I'm not that close. Let's move farther on X, do 130. Okay, we're pretty close, 140. That's pretty close, but it's gotta go down further. So let's move down on Y. By the way, there is definitely a math way to do this, but I'm just gonna, figure it out. Okay, let's move over a little bit more. Okay, that's good enough. That's gonna work for me. And then the thing I'm gonna do to be a little bit clever is I know that the triangle is gonna have the same y, but it's gonna be the other direction. So I'm just gonna copy this one and move my x back to 100. And then I'm gonna subtract another 30 because it's 130, so I'm gonna say 70. Okay, that's pretty good, right, for my triangle points. So that's, if I'm making a triangle, I like to figure out the points first and then I'll put them together. So when I make a triangle, I'm gonna write triangle, and then it's just 3 points in a row. So xy, xy, xy. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy these guys in here. And I'm gonna put a comma, copy the next guys in here, put a comma. This is why triangle's hard. First of all, because there's a lot of numbers. And second of all, is if I change one of the numbers, it's gonna get weird. So that looks pretty good. I'm gonna get rid of these circles because I don't need them anymore. Or I'll just comment them out just so they're there for historical documentation. I think I actually want to move the top of the triangle up a little bit, so I'm going to change that Y to 50. Or that's too far. Let's change it to, I'm going to hit Command Z. Okay, I'll try 55. Okay, that looks good. Although I brought my circles back, I'm going to select those and hit Command question mark to get rid of them. There we go. There's my triangle. And I don't need the triangle to be perfect because what I'm actually using this for is to hide my circle. So I'm gonna set the fill to the same color as my rectangle. So I'm gonna copy that and paste that. Well, let's put it down here. Okay, this isn't that close, but it's getting there. Okay, if I really wanted to, I could play with where those things are, but I'm not gonna do that right now. Okay, now I'm not gonna go through this whole thing because I think you guys get the basic idea, and I don't want to spend the whole class just like obsessing over my triangle, which I would do normally. But what I would do now is actually what I'm realizing is that I don't need this triangle. What I really need is just to block out the entire rest of the circle. And so to do that, let's bring my circles back. Okay, what I really need here is something that cuts out this circle. So, like, cuts out this whole thing. I could use an arc. The arc is really hard. I'm going to go over that later. Some of you guys could probably figure out the arc pretty quick, but it has a bunch more parameters. So the right way to do this is use an arc. But the way I'm going to try to do it is I'm just going to make my triangle really big, I guess. Let's move our green circles around. So I'll also label these circles. So I'm going to put a comment after the code and say this is the top circle, this is the right circle, and this is the left circle. That makes it easier for me to understand because the computer doesn't really care. It doesn't think about what's right and left. It just puts things where I tell it to. But this is going to help me in my brain understand where stuff is. So I need to move the top circle up. So I'm just going to do like 0 on Y. That's easy. Although it's going to intersect with my square. So I'll do like 25. Oh yeah, I'm going to run into a different issue here. Okay, whatever. Let's keep going. Okay, so then the left circle, I want to move this over to like 25. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this with a circle. Let's keep going. Let's see if we can figure out. Then the right circle, I need to move way down. I'm going to move that down to like 150. Okay, so let's update our coordinates. So it goes X, Y, X, Y, X, Y. So I'll change this to 25. I'll change this to 150. And change this to 25. Ooh, that's not bad. Okay, so you can see what I'm going for now. I've hidden the red circle. And so now I can make a yellow circle. Although the yellow circle is going to cover the red circle, isn't it? This is what programming is like. You go down one path and you realize it's the wrong one, and then, I make a different design. So let's just, this is fine, whatever. What I would probably do is use arcs. Arcs is going to be the right way to do this with better math. But this is kind of fun, trying to figure this out. I'll just add another circle. Well, I think this is enough. I've gone over the basic stuff. You guys don't need to see me obsess over getting this right. You can choose something that will, maybe be a little more simple than this. But I'm going to stay there. Maybe what I'll do is just make a couple different slices that are not intersecting so I don't drive myself nuts. Anyway, I've already taken up a good amount of time. I hope this kind of covers some of the basics. You guys are going to have some time to play around with these, and you don't have to get it perfect today. So just kind of play around with some stuff, make some shapes and colors, and see what you can get. When you're done, what we want to do is we want to post this on the class blog. And again, this doesn't have to be the absolutely perfect, best drawing that ever was created. We're just, starting to learn this stuff. So get something that you like and you think looks decent and shows some progress that you've made. But then what we really want to do is go document this on the class blog. The way that we can do that is relatively easy. We're just going to take a picture of this and then we're going to post it on there. And so the way that we can take a picture of the image is we can actually save the canvas as an image. So what I'm going to do, this code, you guys can just take this from this sketch, just copy it over, because it's a little more advanced, but it's just going to make things a bit easier. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to say function mouse pressed. And this is basically like a function that does something when we press the mouse on the canvas. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to save, and I'm going to save an image. So the save function will save an image. I'm going to give this image a name. I'm going to call it art attempt 1, because I'm going to keep working on this. And then I'll just call it .jpeg, so it'll know what type of image I want to use. And then I'm going to run this code again. And now if I click this, it's going to save an image into my downloads folder. So if I go to my Finder, go to downloads, here's this image. And we're going to post that on the blog. So that's the next step. I have a lot of tabs open, but I think the blog is right here. So once you're logged in and you've joined the class blog, you'll see these buttons up here. And this is how you can actually make content on the blog yourself. So you can click on this plus button and you're going to be able to create a post. And if you've used blogging software before, this should be pretty familiar if you've used like Twitter or Tumblr or anything like that. But I'll go over some of the basics. This is called WordPress. So it's just a blogging platform that the Open Lab uses. There's a menu right here, which may not be open. So if you don't see this menu, just click on this button. You're going to get this thing telling you to choose a category. You don't have to do it right away, but it'll make that thing go away, which will be nice. And so you can see the categories are already here. So I'm just going to click on assignment 1, recreate an artwork. And then I'm going to start writing my post. So the first thing that you can write is a title. I'm just going to call this after the image. So I'm going to call this 3 segments in translational motion. It's a very long title. So I'm going to copy that and paste. And I'm going to write some text just talking about what I'm doing. And this is a good practice. This is how we're going to submit our work, but this is also just a good practice to get into as a artist or designer or programmer, creative person. One of the main things that you're going to want in the future for jobs and applying to other schools and other programs, things like that, is a strong portfolio. And having a strong portfolio means explaining, what we're looking at, understanding what's going on. So I'm going to just explain this a little bit. I'm going to say this is my first attempt using P5 to recreate an artwork. I am paste that name again, 3 segments in translational motion by Julio Le Park. And if I want to put a link to this website, I can do that. I can just copy this link here, and I can go here and paste. And it's going to do this thing where it tries to embed the URL. That's not what I want to do, so I'm just going to say convert to link. And this is kind of ugly, so maybe I will click on this link button, or I'll click here and edit this. So I'll say text. I'll just paste the text in again. Or I'll say view the artwork on the web. And I'll click on here if I want to open a new tab. I'll save that. So now I have a link on the page so people can see what you're talking about. And now I'm going to add that image that I just created. So if I want to add an image, I use this plus button. And this is going to bring up the block editor. I can use different types of things in my blog. And the image is one of the defaults, but if you don't see that, just type in image and you'll see it come up. There's our image, and I can actually drag and drop, but I can also click upload and it'll bring up the Finder. And I can, I'm already on the downloads. You might be on desktop or whatever. Just go to downloads and find that. I don't know why it's over here. That's kind of weird, but whatever. We'll see if it looks like that later. So now I have my image, and now the last thing to do is add a link to your code. So that way I can click on the code, I can click on that link and I can see what your code looks like. I can say, oh, good job, you did this well, or oh, you might want to try this, or there's whatever error, something like that. So I'm gonna go back to my P5 sketch. It's on autosave, but I'm just gonna save to make sure. I'm gonna copy this link here, but you can also go to File, Share, and copy the edit link, the last one here. Or just click on here and it'll copy. And then just paste it in there. And we don't want to embed, so just convert to link. And you could say, you could change this. You could leave it as is, or if you wanted to say something nicer, say link to my code. And click save. Okay, so we're almost done. We can take a look at what this is going to look like by previewing it in WordPress. And our image looks fine, so that's nice. I don't know why it looks weird on the editor, but that's okay. So we have the name of our image. This is my first attempt, blah, blah, blah. Here's a link to the artwork. Here's a link to my code. And that's what I need to do. So once you've done all that, you want to click publish. This is what's going to make it publicly available. And it makes you click publish again because it wants to make sure you really want to publish. And once that's done, you can click view post. You can copy this link. When you click view post, this is going to be on the class blog. So when you go to posts, you will see your post here. If you click on like the category, it's going to show you every post in that category. If you click on the title, it's going to show you the post. And if you click on your name, you're going to see all of the posts that you've made. If you're logged in and you need to edit, just click on this edit button and it'll bring you to that post, and you can make changes. If you have a typo or you want to add something later, you can click edit and do that. You can also, if you go to the dashboard, you can see all of your posts on the class blog. For me, I see everything because I'm the admin, but for you, you're just going to see the posts that you've made. Okay, once we have done that, we've got our link. To submit this assignment, all you're going to do is go to assignments on Blackboard. Let me go to student preview. Go to assignments on Blackboard, go to assignment 1, go down to create submission, paste that OpenLab link in there. You don't have to put anything else because everything that I need to view is on that post. So just put that link in there and click submit, and that'll be it. So I'll look at it, I'll go through the rubric and say, this looks good, need more work on this, blah, blah, blah. And then if you want to resubmit it, you can do that. And that's it. So sorry, that went a little bit longer than intended. I wanted to cover a few different things. Don't feel intimidated. If this is the first time you're writing P5 or JavaScript or code, you're going to get used to it. It looks crazy at first because there's a lot of new things that are going on. But just take this time to kind of play around with some stuff. If you end up with 2 shapes and 3 colors, that's fine. This is just, we're just getting started. So don't worry about creating a masterpiece on your first try. Yeah. If you end up with nothing, that's fine. Oh, like it doesn't show you anything? That's okay. So if you have an error, sometimes this will happen. Like, for example, let's say I have like a space here, just like a random mistake, and I run this code and you see nothing. Is that kind of what you mean? So if you see nothing, that means you have some error somewhere in your code. Most likely at this point, the easiest thing to do is just tell me and I'll come look at it. I've seen every error in the world, so I'll be able to tell what it is. But if you want to try to figure it out, open up the console, open up this section, and it'll actually tell you where the error is. And sometimes it'll tell you even what to do. Not every time, but sometimes it'll give you a hint. We'll talk more about that. That's called debugging, fixing the program. We'll talk more about that in a couple weeks. But yeah, that's what you can do.
Professor, just an observation. I think also you need to run the code after, like, every time you do something.
Every time you change the code, you need to. So when I'm doing it, let's fix that. What I do is I hit Command Enter, and that runs the code. But you can also just hit that play button. Yeah.
Or enable auto refresh.
Yeah, you can turn on auto refresh and it'll update as you're writing. As I mentioned before, I don't really recommend that because what will happen sometimes is if you have an error and it runs it, sometimes you'll get a Stack Overflow or you'll break something in the browser. So you can do that. It's not the end of the world, but I tend to not use that. Okay, I'm going to stop the